You believe that to solve your problems, you need to care more, control more, and fight more. But onto Buddhist wisdom, coming from over 2,500 years of practice, teaches the liberating paradox: true strength and the flow of life only appear when you let go. I know you are exhausted from trying to hold on to everything. What you call caring is actually attachment, and it is the root of your anxiety. When you learn to observe this tension, without judgment, life begins to flow through you, not against you. Prepare to sleep while listening to this video. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. Have you ever noticed how tightly you grip the steering wheel when you're stuck in traffic, as if your sheer will could make the cars ahead move? Or how you check your phone repeatedly for a message you're waiting for, convinced that your anticipation alone might speed up the reply? We live our lives under the assumption that we are the pilots, that through enough planning, worrying, and effort, we can chart a steady course through the chaos. This belief, however comforting, is perhaps the most pervasive and painful illusion we entertain. The fundamental teaching of dukkha, often translated as suffering or unsatisfactoriness, points directly to this core issue. It suggests that a significant portion of our discontent doesn't come from the pain itself, but from our frantic, fruitless struggle to manage the unmanageable. Life, in its very essence, is a constant flow of change, a river of phenomena that arises and passes away without asking for our permission. We find ourselves clinging to moments of pleasure, desperate to make them last, and resisting moments of pain, pushing them away with all our might. This clinging and resisting is the engine of our stress. It's not the changing circumstances that hurt us, but our rigid attachment to how we think things should be. Our minds are conditioned to seek stability, to create solid ground in what is essentially a shifting sand dune. From a very young age, we are taught to set goals, to build a future, to accumulate possessions and status, all in the name of securing our happiness. Society celebrates the illusion of control, rewarding those who appear to have their lives perfectly mapped out. We are sold the idea that with the right 5-year plan, the right diet, the right mindset, we can inoculate ourselves against misfortune. This narrative is so powerful that we internalize it, believing that any deviation from our planned path is a personal failure. We try to control our relationships, expecting people to behave in ways that suit our needs. We try to control our careers, mistaking professional success for inner peace. We even try to control our own emotions, bottling up sadness or faking happiness, thinking we can command our inner world like a thermostat. But the universe operates on a principle of impermanence, known in this philosophy as anicca. Everything you see, feel, and own is in a state of flux. Your body is not the same as it was a minute ago. Cells are dying and being reborn. Your thoughts are like clouds drifting through the sky of your mind, here one moment and gone the next. The job you have today might not exist tomorrow. The person you love will change, and so will you. To resist this fundamental truth is to fight a battle you cannot win. It is like trying to hold back the ocean with your bare hands. The more you struggle, the more you exhaust yourself, and the more you suffer. The practice of letting go, therefore, is not a passive resignation or a cold indifference to the world. It is not about becoming a detached, unfeeling robot. On the contrary, it is an active and profound understanding that the attempt to control is itself the source of our anxiety and frustration. It is about shifting from a stance of grasping to one of allowing. When you stop trying to force the river, you can finally learn to float with the current. This is where practical tools like mindfulness meditation become invaluable. When you sit quietly and observe your breath, you quickly see how your mind is a perpetual motion machine of control. It wanders into the past, trying to rewrite history, or it leaps into the future, trying to script outcomes. The practice is simply to notice this happening without judgment, to gently guide your attention back to the present sensation of the breath. In that simple act, you are not trying to stop your thoughts. You are realizing that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness witnessing them. This creates a tiny space, a gap between the impulse to control and your reaction to it. In that space, freedom begins to grow. You start to see that a thought is just a thought. An emotion is just a sensation in the body that comes and goes. The urge to check your phone for the 10th time is just a passing mental event, not a command you must obey. By observing the mechanics of your own mind in this way, the futility of the control project becomes stunningly clear. You cannot stop a feeling from arising, but you can stop adding a layer of struggle on top of it. You cannot make someone love you, but you can release the story that your worth depends on it. You cannot guarantee your financial future, but you can engage with your work today with full presence and skill. Letting go of the illusion of control is an act of immense trust. It is trusting that life itself is intelligent and that you are an inseparable part of that intelligence. It is trusting that you have the innate capacity to respond wisely to whatever arises, without needing to pre-approve all of reality. This doesn't mean you become irresponsible. You still pay your bills, you still care for your loved ones, you still set intentions, but you do so with an open hand, not a clenched fist. You invest your energy in the action itself, in the quality of your effort, and you release your attachment to the specific result. The outcome is influenced by a million factors beyond your control: the economy, other people's choices, pure chance. When you fixate on a particular result, you set yourself up for disappointment. When you focus on the process, you find a deep and sustainable satisfaction. The flow of life is not something to be managed. It is something to be participated in. When you stop caring in the sense of stop controlling, you start living. Creativity blossoms because you are not blocked by the fear of making a bad painting. Relationships deepen because you are not suffocating them with expectations. Even difficult emotions become manageable because you are not fighting them. You are simply feeling them, allowing them to teach you what they must, and then watching them transform on their own. The peace that comes from this is not the peace of a quiet life, but the peace of a mind that is no longer at war with what is. It is the freedom to engage with the world fully, passionately, and compassionately, without the constant background noise of manipulation and resistance. You become like a leaf floating on the surface of a stream, moving with the water, sometimes through calm pools and sometimes over rough rocks, but always carried, always part of the flow. This is the beginning of wisdom, the first step in a journey toward a life that is not less engaged, but more authentically so, rooted in reality rather than in fear. So, if letting go of control is the first step, what is the very ground we're learning to walk on? It's the undeniable, ever-present truth of impermanence. Look at a simple cup of coffee left on your desk. It's steaming hot when you first pour it, but if you get distracted for even 10 minutes, you come back to find it lukewarm, then eventually cold. You did nothing to make it cold. It simply changed on its own, following the natural law of things. This is anicca, the principle of impermanence, and it is not some distant philosophical idea. It is the most fundamental texture of your reality, observable in every single moment if you only care to look. Your body is not the same body you had as a child, or even the same body you had yesterday. Trillions of cells have died and been replaced. Your thoughts are in constant motion. A happy memory arises. a worry follows, and then a plan for dinner, each one replacing the last like waves on a shore. The weather changes, your favourite shirt wears out, a song you love ends, and a conversation you're enjoying concludes. Everything that has a beginning has an end. This is not a negative or pessimistic observation. It is simply a fact, as neutral as gravity. The profound suffering we experience, the dukkha, does not come from this change itself. The problem arises from our deep-seated, often unconscious, resistance to it. We want the good moments to last forever and the bad moments to never have happened. We cling to the memory of a perfect vacation, trying to recapture its feeling, and we rage against the diagnosis that signals a decline in our health. This clinging and resisting is what creates the friction, the mental agony of being at odds with reality. It is like trying to hold on to water by squeezing it in your fist. The tighter you grip, the more it slips through your fingers. The practice, then, is not to stop things from changing. That is impossible, but to change our relationship with change. It is to learn the art of floating with the river's current instead of exhausting ourselves by swimming stubbornly upstream. This begins with a simple period, direct contemplation of impermanence in your daily life. You do not need to sit in a cave to do this. Start with your breath. Notice how each inhalation naturally gives way to an exhalation. You cannot pause your breath at the top without creating tension. It must flow. Notice the food on your plate. It was once a separate collection of ingredients, now a meal, and soon it will be digested and become part of your body, or waste. Watch a tree throughout the seasons. Its lush green leaves in summer will turn brilliant colours and fall in autumn, leaving bare branches in winter, only for new buds to appear in spring. This cycle is not a tragedy. It is the tree's natural expression. Apply this same observation to your emotions. When a wave of anger or sadness arises, instead of getting swept away by the story behind it, try to just feel the physical sensation in your body. Where is it? What is its quality? Is it hot, cold, tight, throbbing? And then watch what happens. You will see that no matter how intense it feels, it does not stay. It peaks, it changes, it subsides, and it passes. The emotion you felt an hour ago is not the same one you feel now. By watching this process, you are not being passive. You are conducting a radical experiment that proves to you, through direct experience, that you are not your passing states. This mindful observation is the practical antidote to attachment. When you see clearly that everything is in flux, the mind's compulsive habit of clinging starts to loosen its grip. Why would you try to possess a cloud that is already shifting shape in the sky? This understanding, when it moves from an intellectual concept to a lived knowing, is incredibly liberating. It does not lead to a cold, detached cynicism, as some might fear. On the contrary, it leads to a much deeper and more heartfelt appreciation for the beauty of each moment. Precisely because you know that this moment is fleeting, that this conversation with a friend is unique and will never happen again, that the light falling across the room in a certain way is temporary, you learn to truly value it. You stop taking things for granted. Gratitude becomes a natural response, not a forced practice. You learn to drink deeply from the cup of now, because you know it will not be offered again in this exact form. Integrating this truth into your life also dramatically reduces the trauma associated with loss and endings. Of course, it still hurts when a relationship ends or a loved one passes away. The practice of anicca does not erase natural grief, but it does prevent that grief from turning into a prolonged, debilitating state of resistance. It allows you to feel the sadness without the added layer of "this should not be happening." You begin to understand that endings are not personal failures. They are part of the contract of life. The flower is not being punished when it wilts. It is simply completing its cycle. When you stop fighting the natural flow of endings, you conserve an enormous amount of energy that was previously spent on denial and anger. This energy becomes available for healing, for new beginnings, and for responding to life with more resilience and grace. The fear of the future, which is a major source of anxiety, also loses its power when you embrace impermanence. Anxiety is essentially the mind's attempt to control a future that is, by its nature, unknown and uncontrollable. When you deeply accept that the future will be a series of changing, unpredictable moments, you can relax your grip on the need to know exactly how it will all turn out. Your trust shifts from your ability to control outcomes to your capacity to respond wisely to whatever arises. This is a much more reliable source of security because it is based on your own inner resourcefulness, which is present here and now, rather than on a hypothetical future scenario. Life becomes an adventure to be lived, not a problem to be solved. You start to participate in the dance of change with more spontaneity and creativity, less burdened by the weight of what was or what should be. This is the freedom that Anika offers. It is not a freedom from life's ups and downs, but a freedom within them. It is the liberation that comes from no longer arguing with what is true. You stop wasting your life force on impossible battles against the tide, and you learn to ride the waves, sometimes skillfully, sometimes clumsily, but always moving, always part of the great, unfolding flow of existence. This understanding is the bedrock upon which all other practices of letting go are built, because you cannot truly release something you are still trying to make permanent. When you make peace with change, you make peace with life itself. Now, with this deep acceptance of impermanence, a natural and perhaps unsettling question arises: if everything is in constant flux, from our thoughts to our very bodies, then what exactly is this self we're so fiercely protecting? We operate under the assumption that there's a solid, unchanging me inside, a CEO in the head making decisions, a permanent owner of our experiences, a stable entity that has likes, dislikes, and a life story. This feeling of a separate, continuous self is incredibly convincing, but what if it's the most fundamental illusion we carry? This is the exploration of non-self, a concept that isn't about annihilation but about investigating what we actually are. When you start to look for this permanent I with honest curiosity, you might be surprised. You won't find a little homunculus behind your eyes pulling the levers. Instead, you find a flowing, interdependent process. Ancient teachings break this down into 5 aggregates, or heaps, that constantly interact to create the mirage of a separate self. The first is form, which is your physical body, made of elements from the food you eat and the water you drink, all borrowed from the environment and changing by the second. The second is sensation, the bare experience of feeling something as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. The third is perception, the mental label you stick on that sensation. This is a cup. This is pain. This is my friend's voice. The fourth is mental formations, which include your thoughts, emotions, habits, and volitions. All those conditioned responses that arise based on past experiences. And the fifth is consciousness, the simple awareness of any of these phenomena. The key point is that none of these aggregates are you in a permanent sense. They are a constantly shifting assembly, a river of processes. Your body is a process of metabolism and cell regeneration. Your thoughts are a process of arising and passing. Your emotions are weather patterns in the mind. There is no solid, independent core to be found. This isn't just philosophy. It's something you can verify for yourself through simple mindfulness. Sit quietly, and watch your breath. A thought about work pops up. Who is thinking that thought? Did you decide to think it, or did it simply appear? Then a feeling of boredom arises. Did you summon that feeling, or did it emerge on its own due to conditions like tiredness or restlessness? Then a memory floats by. Where did it come from? You'll see that experiences happen, but there's no little self inside having them. Independently, there is just the experiencing itself. The sense of I is itself another thought, another feeling, another perception that arises and falls within this flow. It's a useful convention for navigating the world, but we make a critical error when we take it to be ultimately real. This misconception is the very engine of attachment. We say, my car, my opinion, my success, my pain, reinforcing the idea of a solid owner who possesses these things. This identification is what clinging is all about. We cling to possessions because we believe they define us. We cling to beliefs because we think they are us. We cling to relationships because we fear the I will be lost or diminished without them. Every time we attach, we are strengthening the illusion of the separate self, building walls between me and everything else. This creates a profound sense of isolation and vulnerability. If I am this solid thing, then everything outside is a potential threat or a potential source of fulfillment, and I must constantly manage it all. This is exhausting. Seeing through this illusion doesn't mean you become a blank slate or lose your personality. Your unique combination of habits, memories, and traits will still be there, but they won't feel so solid and burdensome. They will be seen for what they are. Temporary patterns, like a unique whirlpool in a river. The water in the whirlpool is constantly changing, yet the pattern persists for a while. When you stop identifying as the fixed whirlpool and start realizing you are the entire river, something incredible happens. The need to control, to possess, to defend starts to lose its power. Why? Because if there is no solid attacher, then who is there to do the attaching? The mental processes that used to generate clinging are still there, but you see them as impersonal events. A desire arises. Instead of, I want that, it becomes there is wanting. You can observe the desire with curiosity, see its conditions, and watch it pass, without it having to define you. This is how letting go becomes effortless. It's not a forceful rejection, but a natural falling away when the underlying misconception is cleared up. The fear of loss transforms. If there's no solid self to lose something, then loss is just another change in the pattern. This understanding fosters a deep sense of interconnection. When the walls of the separate self begin to crumble, you stop seeing yourself as a lonely island fighting against the ocean. You start feeling like you are the ocean itself, in which all waves of experience rise and fall. Other people are not separate others, but other expressions of the same life process. This naturally gives rise to more genuine compassion and less judgment. Your own suffering and the suffering of others are seen as part of the same flow, and the response comes from a place of natural care, not from a sense of duty or a desire to bolster your self-image. Practically, you can work with this in everyday moments. When you feel a strong emotion like anger, instead of getting caught in the story of I am angry, try shifting to anger is present. Feel the physical sensations, the heat, the tension, without buying into the narrative that there is a permanent you that owns this anger. Watch it come and go. When you have a cherished opinion challenged in a conversation, notice the urge to defend your view. See if you can hold the opinion lightly, as a temporary mental formation, not as a part of your core identity. This doesn't mean you become passive. You can still engage and disagree, but you do so from a place of openness, not from a fortified castle of self. This investigation deconstructs the very root of our suffering. The anxiety about the future is the fear of what will happen to me. The regret about the past is the sadness of what happened to me. When the me is seen as a fluid, interdependent process, the stakes feel lower. Life becomes a play of conditions, and you are a participating part of that play, not a separate actor on an isolated stage. This is the ultimate letting go, releasing the attachment to the attacher itself. It's a profound relief, like putting down a heavy weight you didn't even know you were carrying. You can engage with life more fully, love more deeply, and act more wisely, because you are no longer trapped in the small, fragile story of a separate self. You are free to flow with the boundless, ever-changing reality of what is. So, after peering into the nature of the self and finding no solid, permanent entity there, we arrive at a crucial crossroads. If there's no fixed me to protect, then what is this persistent sense of unease? This background hum of dissatisfaction that colours so much of our experience? This brings us directly to the heart of the first noble truth, the truth of dukkha. Now, calling this the truth of suffering can sound incredibly bleak and pessimistic at first glance, as if the whole philosophy is just about admitting life is miserable. But that is a profound misunderstanding. This truth is not a declaration of doom. It is a precise, compassionate, and utterly realistic diagnosis of the human condition. It's like a doctor identifying the symptoms of an illness so that a cure can be found. Dukkha is that feeling of things being slightly off, out of joint, not quite right. It is the stress you feel when you're running late, the anxiety about an upcoming deadline, the subtle boredom during a lazy Sunday afternoon, the frustration when traffic ruins your plans, and the lingering sense that even when things are good, they could be better, or that this goodness won't last. It goes far beyond obvious physical pain and encompasses all the ways we experience friction with reality as it is. The wisdom of dukkha lies in understanding its causes, and in doing so, discovering the path to its cessation. The Buddha meticulously categorized dukkha into 3 levels to help us recognize its various disguises. The first is the suffering of suffering, which is the obvious, plain-to-see stuff. Physical pain, grief, loss, illness, and old age. This is the kind of suffering everyone acknowledges. The second is the suffering of change, which is more subtle and often tricks us. This is the discontent that arises when a pleasant experience ends. You're enjoying a delicious meal, and then it's over, and there's a faint sense of letdown. You have a wonderful vacation, and coming back to routine feels depressing. Even our happiest moments contain the seed of their own ending, and our attachment to them ensures that their passing brings a flavour of pain. The third and most pervasive level is the suffering of conditioned existence. This is a fundamental unsatisfactoriness inherent in all phenomena that are put together, that are dependent on conditions, because everything is impermanent and devoid of a separate self. Any state we experience, even the most blissful meditative state, is unstable and cannot provide lasting, ultimate satisfaction. We keep looking for happiness in things that are, by their very nature, unreliable and transient. We seek security in jobs that can disappear, in relationships that change, in bodies that age, and in opinions that shift. This endless seeking itself is a form of dukkha. The pivotal move from being a victim of suffering to becoming free from it begins with this very recognition. You have to stop and honestly acknowledge, yes, there is suffering here. This is not complaining or wallowing in self-pity. It is a courageous and clear-eyed acceptance of what is present. You feel anxious? Okay, anxiety is present. You feel lonely? Okay, loneliness is here. This simple, non-judgmental acknowledgement is the first and most critical step. It stops the cycle of resistance where we try to pretend we're fine or we numb ourselves with distractions, or we blame external circumstances for our inner state. When you stop fighting the fact that you are suffering, you conserve an enormous amount of energy that was previously wasted on denial. This energy can then be used for investigation. The practice of stopping caring in the Buddhist sense begins right here, with understanding what exactly causes this dukkha. The diagnosis is clear. The root causes are attachment, aversion, and ignorance. Attachment, or craving, is the mind's tendency to cling to pleasant experiences, people, and states, wanting them to last forever. Aversion is the opposite impulse, the pushing away of unpleasant experiences, wanting them to disappear immediately. And ignorance is the fundamental confusion, the not seeing things as they really are, namely impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. We operate under the illusion that getting what we want will make us happy forever, and avoiding what we don't want will make us safe forever. But life does not work that way. So, every time you grasp after a feeling, a possession, or an idea, you are setting yourself up for dukkha. Every time you resist a feeling, a person, or a situation, you are creating inner conflict, which is dukkha. The way out is not to try and arrange the world perfectly to suit your preferences. That is a battle you can never win. The way out is to change your relationship with experience itself. This is where mindfulness becomes your primary tool. When a pleasant sensation arises, instead of automatically latching onto it and trying to make it stay, you can simply observe it. There is pleasure. You enjoy it fully, but you hold it lightly, knowing it is a guest that will soon depart. When an unpleasant sensation arises, instead of tensing up and trying to fight it, you can open to it with curiosity. Oh, this is unpleasant. You feel the physical sensations of the unpleasantness without adding a layer of mental commentary about how much you hate it or how it shouldn't be there. By observing these experiences with bare attention, you start to see their true nature. They arise due to conditions. They hang around for a while, and then they pass away. You are not defined by them. This investigative process gradually erodes the power of attachment and aversion. You begin to see that the suffering is not in the pain itself, but in your resistance to it. The pain is a physical sensation. The suffering is the mental anguish you add on top. The loss of a job is an event. The suffering is the story you tell yourself about failure and insecurity. As you deepen this investigation, the mind naturally, organically, begins to turn away from the causes of dukkha. It's not a forced suppression of desire or a white-knuckled tolerance of pain. It is a genuine disillusionment. You see for yourself, through direct experience, that clinging to what is fleeting only brings pain. It's like finally realizing that touching a hot stove always results in a burn. You don't need to will yourself to stop. You just naturally stop doing it. This understanding is what leads to letting go. Letting go becomes the most intelligent and obvious response. Why would you cling to something that is causing you distress? This journey of understanding dukkha is not a one-time event, but a continuous unfolding. It requires patience and gentle persistence. There will be days when you are fully aware and days when you are completely caught in the whirlwind of attachment and aversion. The practice is to meet all of it with the same compassionate inquiry. This path does not lead to a life devoid of feeling, but to a life where feelings no longer rule you. You can experience joy without the fear of its loss, and you can experience pain without the added terror. You become more resilient, more responsive, and more genuinely available for life. The ultimate goal of this investigation is not just to manage suffering better, but to uproot it completely, to realize the cessation of dukkha, which is nibbana, a state of unshakable peace and freedom that is not dependent on changing conditions. It is the end of the struggle. the final laying down of the burden, and it all starts with the courageous and simple act of turning towards your suffering, not as an enemy, but as a teacher showing you the way home. So, you've started to recognize the patterns of dukkha in your life, that underlying hum of dissatisfaction, and you might be wondering what comes next. If struggling against reality causes suffering, does that mean I should just give up and become passive? This is where a crucial distinction must be made, one that separates a path of liberation from one of quiet despair. The practice is called radical acceptance, and it is the absolute opposite of resentful passivity. Acceptance, in this context, has nothing to do with resignation or rolling over in the face of difficulty. It is not about approving of injustice or tolerating abuse. Think of it this way. If you are hiking and you come to a massive fallen tree blocking the path, passivity would be sitting down in defeat, complaining about the unfairness, and waiting for someone else to move it. Acceptance, however, is the clear-eyed, non-judgmental recognition that there is a tree on the path. You see it exactly as it is. You don't waste energy shouting at the tree, wishing it were gone, or blaming the forest. This honest acknowledgement is an act of immense courage and clarity. It is only from this place of seeing reality as it is that you can then make a wise decision about what to do next. Maybe you climb over it. Maybe you go around it. Or maybe you rest for a moment before figuring it out. Passivity springs from a place of internalized resistance and a feeling of powerlessness. It is a state of being stuck. Radical acceptance springs from a place of fearless openness and empowers you to act skillfully. This is especially true when dealing with our inner world. Let's say a wave of anxiety arises. The passive response is often to numb it out, to distract yourself with your phone, or to collapse into the story that you are an anxious person, and there is nothing you can do. This feels like giving up, and it usually leaves a residue of resentment towards yourself or the situation. The accepting response is to turn towards the anxiety with curiosity. You might say to yourself, okay, anxiety is here. You feel the physical sensations in your body, the tightness in the chest, the quickened heartbeat. You observe the worried thoughts as mere mental events, like clouds passing in the sky. You don't try to suppress the feeling, nor do you fuel it by buying into its catastrophic narratives. You simply allow it to be present, holding it in awareness. This does not mean you like the anxiety. It means you are no longer at war with it. By disarming this internal conflict, you stop the second arrow. The first arrow is the initial pain or anxiety itself. The second arrow is the suffering we add on top through our resistance, our stories, and our struggle. Acceptance is the practice of not shooting that second arrow. It conserves all the energy you would have spent fighting what is already happening, and that energy becomes available for a constructive response. This is why acceptance is the gateway to genuine change. You cannot change a reality that you are refusing to acknowledge. You cannot heal a wound you pretend isn't there. By fully accepting the present moment, including its difficulties, you create a solid foundation from which transformation can naturally occur. This applies to everything from minor irritations to profound grief. When you lose someone you love, acceptance is not about pretending you are not sad. It is about fully allowing the grief to move through you, to feel the ache of loss without resistance, trusting that this process is part of healing. The practice of Tonglen, a meditation on giving and receiving, takes this even further. In Tonglen, you breathe in the pain, suffering, and darkness of yourself and others, not with masochism, but with a courageous heart that acknowledges the universality of suffering. Then, on the out-breath, you send out relief, peace, and light. This is active acceptance. You are transforming your relationship with pain by meeting it with compassion instead of fear. It is a way of recycling suffering into empathy. Now, how do you cultivate this radical acceptance in daily life? It starts with mindfulness, the simple act of noticing what is happening right now without immediately labeling it as good or bad. You are stuck in traffic. Instead of clenching the steering wheel and cursing your luck, you notice the tension in your shoulders. You acknowledge the feeling of impatience. You see the red lights ahead. This is what is happening. From that place of calm acknowledgement, you might decide to put on a podcast or just use the time to breathe. The situation might not change, but your experience of it transforms completely. Another area is in relationships. Acceptance does not mean you allow people to walk all over you. It means you see them clearly without the filter of your expectations. You accept that your partner sometimes leaves dishes in the sink, not because you think it is ideal, but because you see that fighting about it constantly creates more suffering than the dishes themselves. This clarity might then lead to a calm, effective conversation about shared responsibilities, or it might lead to you simply washing the dish without an internal monologue of resentment. The same goes for your own flaws. You accept that you have a quick temper, not to justify it, but to see it honestly. From that honest space, you can learn its triggers and work with it skillfully, rather than being ashamed and trying to hide it. The beauty of this practice is that it builds resilience. Life will always bring pleasure and pain, gain and loss. When you meet all of it with an accepting heart, you are no longer thrown off balance so easily. The 8 worldly winds, praise and blame, fame and disrepute, pleasure and pain, gain and loss, lose their power to dictate your inner state. You can receive criticism without collapsing into self-doubt and receive praise without getting addicted to it. This is freedom. It is the freedom to respond to life from a center of balance, rather than reacting from a place of knee-jerk attachment or aversion. Radical acceptance is ultimately an act of trust. It is trusting that you are strong enough to handle whatever arises. It is trusting that the present moment, exactly as it is, contains the seeds of wisdom and the possibility for growth. It is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of true engagement with life. When you stop fighting reality, you start flowing with it. And in that flow, you find a peace that is not dependent on circumstances. This is how you stop caring in the way that causes suffering and start caring in a way that is wise, compassionate, and truly free. You move from being a victim of your experience to being a conscious participant in the unfolding of your life. And that is a power that no external circumstance can ever take away from you. This shift from resistance to acceptance is perhaps the most practical and transformative skill you can develop, turning every moment, no matter how difficult, into an opportunity for awakening and for living with a heart that is open to all that is. After embracing radical acceptance, you might notice a subtle shift happening. You start to see that some of the things you've been holding on to, whether they're physical objects, mental habits, or even certain relationships, no longer serve the peace you're cultivating. This natural progression leads us directly into the heart of renunciation, a practice that is often misunderstood as a grim, joyless austerity or a forced deprivation. Nothing could be further from the truth. Buddhist renunciation is not about punishing yourself or rejecting the world. It is about the profound and often surprising joy of setting down a heavy burden you have been carrying for far too long. It is a conscious, willing trade. You are exchanging a smaller, temporary pleasure for a much larger and more enduring peace. Think of it like this. You are carrying a heavy, outdated backpack on a long hike. Inside are rocks you picked up years ago, thinking they were valuable. Renunciation is the moment you stop, open the pack, look at each rock, and decide to leave most of them behind. The relief is immediate and tangible. Your step becomes lighter, your journey becomes easier, and you have more energy to appreciate the scenery around you. This is the essence of renunciation. It is an act of intelligence, not masochism. This practice involves letting go on two fronts, the external and the internal. Externally, it might mean decluttering your home, simplifying your diet, or reducing your consumption of things you do not truly need. But the far more profound work is internal. It is about renouncing the harmful mental patterns that cause you and others suffering, patterns like greed, ill will, and delusion. You learn to recognize the impulse to grasp for more, the urge to push away what you dislike, and the cloud of confusion that makes you believe that external things can bring lasting happiness. Every single act of renunciation, no matter how small, is a powerful vote of confidence in simplicity. It is a strengthening of your mind against the conditioned impulses that usually run your life. When you choose not to buy that unnecessary item on impulse, you are not just saving money, you are training your mind in non-attachment. When you choose to let go of a recurring resentful thought, you are not just avoiding an argument, you are actively dismantling a pattern of aversion. Each time you do this, you are building a mental muscle. You are proving to yourself that you are not a slave to your desires or your aversions. This creates something magical. Space, renunciation. Create space in your mind, in your heart, and in your physical environment. When your mind is not crowded with wants and dislikes, there is room for clarity and quiet to emerge. When your heart is not clogged with old grudges and attachments, there is room for genuine love and compassion to flow. When your home is not filled with clutter, there is room for peace and order. It is in this newly created space that higher qualities like contentment, freedom, and joy can naturally begin to flourish. Contentment is not something you can chase. It arises when the chasing stops. Freedom is not found in getting everything you want, but in no longer being controlled by what you want. The practice is deeply investigative and practical. It is not about following a rigid set of rules. It is about cultivating a curious, experimental mindset. You ask yourself, what happens if I let this go? What space opens up inside me? This curiosity becomes the driving force, replacing the old fear of deprivation, that fear is a powerful illusion. We are terrified that if we let go of something, a possession, a habit, a belief, we will be diminished. We will be less happy. We will be missing out. But the practice invites you to test this assumption. Let go of one thing, just one small thing, and observe what actually happens. You might let go of the need to be right in a petty disagreement. Instead of feeling deprived of victory, you likely feel a wave of relief and connection. You might donate a box of clothes you never wear. Instead of feeling a sense of loss, you feel lighter and more generous. This direct experience is what rewires your understanding. You start to see that the thing you were clinging to was actually costing you more energy and peace than it was providing. The culmination of this path is not poverty or emptiness. It is the discovery of an unshakable inner wealth. This is a richness that does not depend on your bank account, your social status, your relationships, or your health. It is a wellspring of peace and fulfillment that is inherent within you, accessible at any moment. When the clouds of attachment part, you realize that you are already whole and complete. External circumstances can come and go. You can experience gain and loss, praise and blame, but this inner core of well-being remains undisturbed. This does not mean you live in a cave and own nothing. It means you relate to everything in your life with a sense of non-possessiveness. You can enjoy beautiful things, deep relationships, and meaningful work, but you hold them all with an open hand. You care for them. You appreciate them, but you do not cling to them. You understand their transient nature. This is the ultimate freedom. The practice of renunciation is a gradual, loving process. It is not about ripping things away from yourself violently. It is a gentle, ongoing inquiry into what truly serves your happiness and the happiness of others. You start with the easy stuff, the obvious clutter, the low-hanging fruit. Then, as your wisdom and courage grow, you move on to the more subtle attachments, to your self-image, your opinions, your need for control. It is a journey of uncovering the lightness of being that has been there all along, buried under the weight of all the things you thought you needed. This is how you open your hand to gain everything, because what you gain is nothing less than your own inherent freedom and peace. So, after tasting the freedom that comes from letting go, from consciously setting down those heavy burdens, you might find yourself in a new kind of space, lighter, for sure, but also potentially unfamiliar. Life doesn't stop happening. Challenges still arise, pleasures still tempt, and pains still visit. The question becomes, how do you navigate this flow without getting tossed around by every wave? This is where the profound quality of equanimity comes in, the art of finding perfect balance right in the middle of the chaos. It is not about becoming a stone, unmoved and unfeeling. It is about becoming like the deep ocean, where waves may rage on the surface, but a profound stillness exists beneath. Equanimity is one of the four heart qualities, often called the divine abodes, and it represents a mind that is balanced, serene, and impartial, no matter what is happening around it. Imagine being faced with the 8 worldly winds: pleasure and pain, gain and loss, fame and disrepute, praise and blame. Most of us are like pinballs in a machine, slammed from one side to the other by these forces. One moment we are elated by praise. The next we are crushed by blame. We cling desperately to pleasure and run from pain. Equanimity is the mental and emotional stability that allows you to stand firm in the face of all these changing conditions. It is the ultimate antidote to those knee-jerk reactions of attachment and aversion that we have been exploring. When something pleasant arises, you can enjoy it fully, without the desperate need to make it last forever. When something unpleasant arises, you can meet it with clarity and compassion, without the frantic need to make it disappear. This balanced state allows you to respond to any situation from a place of inner center and wisdom, rather than reacting from a place of blind impulse. This does not mean you become emotionally flat or disconnected. That is a common misunderstanding. Equanimity is not emotional numbness or indifference. In fact, it is the foundation for experiencing all emotions fully and authentically, without being dominated by them. You can feel joy without being addicted to it, and you can feel sadness without being drowned by it. The emotion is experienced, but it does not hijack your entire being. There is a sense of a spacious, aware presence that holds the emotion, witnesses it, and allows it to be, without losing its own stability. This is a deeply empowered way to live. You are no longer a victim of your own emotional weather patterns. So, how do you cultivate this kind of unshakable balance? It is a practice, and it begins with mindfulness and meditation. In meditation, you learn to sit with whatever arises: boredom, agitation, peace, pain, without trying to change it. You observe the breath, you notice thoughts coming and going, and you practice simply being with the experience without judgment. This is the basic training ground for equanimity. You are strengthening the muscle of non-reactive awareness. Another powerful way to develop equanimity is through the contemplation of karma, the law of cause and effect. When you understand that every being is the heir to their own actions, it helps to release the compulsive need to control the happiness and outcomes of others. You realize that you cannot force someone to be happy, and you cannot save them from their own choices. This sounds harsh, but it is actually a profound relief. It allows you to care deeply and offer help, but without the attachment to a specific result. You do your best, you offer your support, and then you let go of the outcome. This prevents the burnout and resentment that comes from trying to manage other people's lives. Equanimity is also cultivated by reflecting on the nature of reality itself, impermanence, non-self, and the inherent unsatisfactoriness of conditioned existence. When you deeply understand that everything is in flux, that no situation, no feeling, no person is permanent, it becomes easier to hold it all lightly. You see that praise and blame are just sounds in the air, that gain and loss are part of an endless cycle. This understanding is not cynical, it is liberating. It allows you to engage fully in the world without being ensnared by it. In the context of letting go, equanimity is the quality that makes the process graceful. It allows people, situations, and experiences to come and go without fundamentally disturbing your inner peace. A relationship ends, and while there is grief, there is not a catastrophic shattering of your identity. A project fails, and while there is disappointment, there is not a collapse of your self-worth. Equanimity provides the emotional resilience to navigate life's inevitable ups and downs with grace and composure. It is the steady ground from which you can practice true love and compassion. Often, our love is conditional. We love others as long as they make us happy, as long as they meet our expectations. Our compassion is often mixed with pity or a desire to fix. But when equanimity is present, love and compassion become unconditional. You can love someone without needing them to be a certain way for you. You can feel compassion for someone's suffering without feeling responsible for fixing it or being dragged down by it. This is a love that liberates both the giver and the receiver. Practicing equanimity in daily life can start with small things. You are stuck in traffic. Instead of reacting with frustration and impatience, you notice the impulse, and you choose to simply be with the situation. You feel the tension in your body, you observe the angry thoughts, and you bring a sense of balance to the experience. You are not passive. You are not condoning the traffic jam. You are simply choosing not to add mental suffering to the situation. Another example is when you receive criticism. Without equanimity, you might either become defensive and angry or collapse into self-doubt. With equanimity, you can listen to the feedback, see if there is any truth in it that you can learn from, and let the rest go without it damaging your sense of self. The same applies to praise. You can receive it appreciatively without letting it inflate your ego. This balanced approach to life's stimuli is a superpower. It conserves an enormous amount of mental and emotional energy that would otherwise be wasted on roller coaster reactions. This energy is then available for what truly matters, for creative action, for deep connection, for mindful presence. Equanimity is not a state you achieve once and for all. It is a quality you cultivate moment by moment. Some days it will be easy, and some days it will be a struggle. The practice is to keep coming back to that center, to that breath, to that non-judgmental awareness. Over time, this balanced stance becomes more and more natural, more your default mode of being. It is the fruit of all the previous work, understanding suffering, embracing impermanence, seeing through the self, practicing acceptance, and engaging in renunciation. It is the calm eye of the hurricane, the unshakable peace that allows you to dance with life in all its beauty and difficulty, fully engaged yet completely free. This is how you stop caring in a way that causes turmoil and start caring with a heart that is wise, stable, and boundless. Now, with that sense of equanimity, that balanced stance in the midst of life's chaos, You might be wondering what the actual mechanics are for maintaining that balance. How do you actually watch the waves without getting swept away? This is where the practical, moment-to-moment work of mindfulness comes in, the simple yet profound practice of paying attention to what is happening right now without judgment. Mindfulness is the primary tool that allows you to observe, in real time, the very process of attachment as it unfolds. It is like turning on a light in a dark room. Suddenly, you can see all the furniture you've been bumping into. You start to see how a thought arises, how it hooks your attention, how a feeling follows, and how the impulse to cling or push away automatically kicks in. This observational power is what begins to decompose the solidity of your attachments, breaking them down into their component parts until they lose their grip on you. The practice is deceptively simple. You just notice what is happening. You notice the sensation of your breath entering and leaving your body. You notice the sounds in the room. You notice the feeling of your feet on the floor. But in that simple noticing, something revolutionary occurs. You create a tiny space, a gap, between the initial stimulus and your habitual reaction. That gap is where your freedom lies. For example, someone says something that irritates you. Without mindfulness, the irritation instantly triggers an angry retort or an internal story of resentment. With mindfulness, you notice the irritation as a physical sensation, a heat in your face, a tightening in your chest. You notice the angry thought as a mental event. In that space of noticing, you have a choice. You are no longer on autopilot. You can choose to respond instead of react. This is how the automatic chain of attachment is broken, link by link, moment by moment. As you practice this more and more, you start to see something even more profound about the things you attach to. That desire for a new phone, that anxiety about a work project, that attachment to a particular outcome in a relationship. When you observe them with mindful awareness, you see that they are not solid, independent entities. They are composite, made up of fleeting sensations, transient thoughts, and passing emotions. They are empty of a permanent, substantial existence. This is not a philosophical abstraction. It is a direct experience. You see that the desire itself is a process that arises, stays for a while, and then passes away, just like everything else. When you see this clearly, the object of your attachment loses its enchanting power. It is revealed as a mirage, a collection of parts that cannot provide the lasting satisfaction you seek. This realization is incredibly liberating. Furthermore, the very act of being fully present is itself a powerful act of non-attachment. A mind that is anchored in the present moment cannot simultaneously be lost in regrets about the past or worries about the future, which are the two primary breeding grounds for attachment. When you are fully here, right now, you are not clinging to what was or grasping for what might be. You are engaging with life as it is, directly and immediately. This presence allows you to meet each experience with a freshness and a clarity that is impossible when you are filtered through the memories of the past or the fantasies of the future. Mindfulness also gives you the capacity to witness desire without being consumed by it. You can say to yourself, there is desire, and simply watch it. You can observe the physical sensations that accompany it, the thoughts that fuel it, and the stories it tells you about why you need to fulfill it. You can see it as a cloud passing through the vast sky of your awareness. The cloud is not the sky, and the desire is not you. You can let it be, without having to act on it or suppress it. This non-identification is key. When you stop identifying with the desire, it loses its authority over you. It may still be there, but it no longer dictates your actions. This is how you can experience a craving for something and still choose not to indulge it, not out of willpower or repression, but out of a clear seeing of its true nature. This process of continuous, non-judgmental observation is what gradually uproots the deep, habitual patterns of attachment known as sankharas. These are the conditioned responses that have been built up over a lifetime, even over many lifetimes, according to some teachings. They are the grooves in the record of your mind that cause the needle to get stuck in the same places. Mindfulness is the tool that smooths out those grooves. It does not happen overnight. It is a gentle, persistent practice of returning to the present again and again. Each time you notice yourself lost in a story of attachment and gently bring your attention back to your breath or your body, you are weakening that habitual pattern. You are literally rewiring your brain. Over time, what used to be a powerful trigger for clinging becomes just another passing phenomenon. The compulsion to grasp or avoid diminishes. Life begins to flow with more naturalness and ease because you are no longer constantly trying to dam the river or change its course. You are flowing with it. In your daily life, you can practice this in countless ways. While washing dishes, you can feel the warmth of the water and the texture of the plates, instead of being lost in thought about what you need to do next. While walking, you can feel the contact of your feet with the ground, instead of planning your entire day in your head. In conversation, you can truly listen to the person speaking, instead of rehearsing your response. Each of these acts is a small but powerful application of mindfulness that decomposes attachment to the past and future, anchoring you in the now. This practice is not about achieving a special state of bliss or emptiness. It is about being fully alive and awake to the ordinary moments of your life. It is about finding the extraordinary in the ordinary by paying close attention. The decomposition of attachment is not a violent tearing away. It is a natural fading, like a stain that slowly washes out in the rain. As you cultivate mindfulness, you will find that you hold everything more lightly. Your possessions, your opinions, your relationships, and even your own self-concept. You engage with the world with more openness, curiosity, and compassion because you are not trying to use it to solidify a sense of self. You are free to experience life directly, without the filter of attachment. And in that direct experience, you find a peace and a freedom that does not depend on circumstances. This is the gift of mindfulness. It returns you to the richness of the present moment, where life is actually happening, and where true letting go becomes not an effort, but the most natural thing in the world. After spending time in mindful observation, watching the rise and fall of desires without getting swept away, you might feel ready for a more active engagement with the process of letting go. It is one thing to watch attachment unfold in the mind, and another to physically, tangibly practice non-attachment in the world. This is where the beautiful, practical discipline of giving comes in. A practice known as dana, generosity, is not just a nice moral virtue. In this path, it is considered the very first of the perfections for a powerful reason. It is the most direct, hands-on training for loosening the grip of materialism and the deeply held belief that we are what we own. Every single act of giving, whether it is a material object, your time, or your full attention, is a small but potent rehearsal for the ego. The ego, that sense of a separate self, builds its fortress through accumulation, my stuff, my money, my achievements. When you give something away, you are actively chipping away at that fortress. You are saying, through your actions, that you are not defined by your possessions. This is not a theoretical concept. It is a physical and mental exercise in letting go. It is a voluntary, conscious release that strengthens the muscle of non-attachment in a way that mere observation alone cannot. Think about the last time you gave something away. There is often a momentary hesitation, a subtle tightening in the chest, a voice that whispers, "But what if I need this later?" That hesitation is the voice of the ego, the part of you that clings. To move through that hesitation and give anyway is a profound victory. It is a small death for the selfish impulse. And in that death, an incredible sense of freedom is born. This practice actively confronts and dismantles the myth of scarcity that governs so much of our lives. We often operate from a mindset that there is not enough money, not enough time, not enough love. This belief fuels our greed and our hoarding tendencies. But when you practice generosity, you directly challenge this story. You discover, through experience, that the opposite is true. The more you give, the more you feel you have to give. A sense of abundance naturally arises. The joy and connection felt in the act of sharing are far more fulfilling and lasting than the fleeting pleasure of acquiring something new. You break the hypnotic spell that material possessions can bring lasting happiness and instead uncover the deep, intrinsic joy found in interconnection and contribution. This is not about becoming a martyr or giving until you have nothing left. The practice is meant to be refined and intelligent. It starts easily enough, perhaps by cleaning out your closet and donating old clothes you never wear. This is a wonderful beginning, but the real training begins when you give something you genuinely value. It is easy to give away things you do not want. The true test of your non-attachment is when you give away something that is precious to you. This could be a favorite book, a piece of jewelry, or a significant amount of your time when you are very busy. In that moment of decision, you are faced with a clear choice: to cling to the object and the comfort it provides your sense of self, or to release it and experience the freedom that follows. This is where the practice moves from being a charitable habit to a transformative spiritual discipline. Furthermore, the ideal in this context is to give without any expectation of reward or recognition. Anonymous giving is highly valued because it purifies the intention. When no one knows you gave, you are not doing it to build a reputation as a generous person or to receive gratitude. The act of letting go becomes its own reward. You are not giving to get something back, not even a thank you. You are giving simply for the sake of giving, for the sake of loosening your own attachments and contributing to the well-being of another. This completely severs the link between the action and the ego's desire for validation. It transforms giving from a transaction into a pure expression of interconnectedness. Cultivating this practice consistently begins to reshape your entire relationship with the material world. You stop seeing objects as things to be possessed and controlled, and you start seeing them as resources that flow through your life. You become a steward, a temporary caretaker of things, rather than a permanent owner. This shift in perspective is profoundly liberating. You can enjoy beautiful objects, use them, and appreciate them, but you hold them lightly, knowing that their true nature is to circulate. Money, for instance, is no longer just a tool for personal security and pleasure. It becomes a current of energy that you can direct towards alleviating suffering and creating good in the world. This does not mean you live in poverty. It means you live with a sense of purpose and flow, trusting that as you give, what you truly need will be provided. The practice of giving extends far beyond material objects. You can give your time by listening deeply to a friend in need, without checking your phone or thinking about what you will say next. You can give your skills, offering your talents to help a cause or an individual without charging a fee. You can give your forgiveness, which is perhaps one of the most difficult forms of generosity, releasing someone from the debt you feel they owe you. Each of these acts is a powerful application of the same principle, letting go for the sake of freedom and connection. In everyday life, you can look for small, intentional opportunities to practice. When you make a meal, you can offer a portion to a neighbor. When you have a few extra minutes, You can perform a small act of kindness for a stranger. When you receive a bonus at work, you can decide to give a portion of it away before you spend any on yourself. The specific action matters less than the conscious intention behind it, the intention to practice release, to weaken the chains of possessiveness, and to actively participate in the flow of generosity that sustains the world. Over time, this active antidote to greed and attachment will change you. The compulsive need to acquire and hold on to things will diminish. You will find more satisfaction in the act of giving than in the act of getting. Your identity will become less wrapped up in what you have and more grounded in who you are and how you contribute. Life begins to feel more fluid and less rigid. You feel lighter, less burdened by the weight of your possessions and the constant anxiety of protecting them. This is the ultimate freedom that the practice of giving offers. It is a freedom that is actively earned through each choice to open your hand and let something go, not with a sense of loss, but with a sense of profound gain. The gain of a heart that is open, resilient, and truly rich. After exploring the freedom that comes from generous giving, from actively practicing non-attachment with our possessions, it is natural to turn our attention to the most complex and emotionally charged area of our lives, our relationships. This is where the principles of letting go are put to their ultimate test. We often confuse a deep dot, genuine love, with a possessive attachment that masquerades as care. True love, in its purest form, is a force that liberates. It wants the happiness and freedom of the other person without demanding anything in return. Attachment, on the other hand, is a contract. It creates prisons of jealousy, control, and a constant low-grade fear of loss. We say we love someone, but our actions are often about securing their presence, their affection, their conformity to our needs. This is not love. It is a form of emotional ownership. The practice here is to cultivate a love that is unconditional, known as metta or loving kindness, and a compassion, karuna, that is directed toward the well-being of others without the hidden clause of reciprocity. This means you genuinely wish for someone to be happy, healthy, and peaceful, whether they are in your life or not, whether they behave in ways you approve of or not. It is a love that is given freely, not as a payment for services rendered. This shift requires a radical acceptance of the most fundamental truth about relationships. They are impermanent by nature. Every relationship you have, from the most casual acquaintance to the most intimate partnership, is in a constant state of flux. People change, circumstances evolve, and sometimes paths diverge. To believe otherwise is to set yourself up for profound suffering. Letting go within a relationship, therefore, does not always mean physically leaving or ending it. More often, it means internally releasing the rigid expectations, the fixed stories, and the unconscious demands you place on the other person. It means abandoning the fantasy that this person exists to make you happy or complete you. You stop needing them to be a certain way for your own sense of okayness. This is where the real work of non-attachment happens. It is about examining the subtle ways you try to control your partner, your friend, or your family member. It is about noticing when you are molding them in your mind to fit an image that serves you, and then consciously letting that image go. You learn to relate to the actual living, breathing, changing person in front of you, not the character you have written for them in the story of your life. This process is immensely challenging because it touches the core of our conditioning and our deepest vulnerabilities. The pain of a relationship ending, whether through a breakup, a distance, or death, becomes a powerful, albeit difficult, training ground for this practice. When you are engulfed in grief and longing, the instinct is to cling to the memory, to the pain itself. as a way of holding on to the connection. The practice is to observe these powerful emotions, the sadness, the loneliness, the anger, without becoming completely identified with them. You allow yourself to feel the raw sensations of grief in your body without getting lost in the mental narratives about why it happened or what you lost. You see the longing as a passing storm in your heart, intense and real, but not the entirety of who you are. In this space of mindful observation, the sharp edges of the pain begin to soften. You realize that the love you felt does not disappear with the person's physical presence or the change in the relationship's form. The love remains as a quality of your own heart, and it can be directed outward as compassion for yourself and for them, wherever they are on their journey. This approach transforms relationships from transactions of need into spaces for mutual growth and discovery. Instead of two incomplete people coming together in a desperate attempt to feel whole, two already complete individuals meet. They share their fullness, their strengths, their vulnerabilities, and their journeys. They support each other without fusing into a single, codependent entity. There is a healthy boundary of selfhood that allows each person to breathe and evolve. In such a relationship, there is no fear of the other's growth or change, because it is not perceived as a threat to the union. In fact, it is celebrated. You become a witness and a supporter of each other's unfolding, knowing that this very unfolding might one day lead you in different directions. This does not make the relationship cold or detached. On the contrary, it allows for a more authentic, passionate, and respectful connection. When you are not afraid of losing the other, you can be more fully present with them. You can communicate more honestly, because you are not filtering your words through a fear of upsetting them and driving them away. You can love them more deeply, because that love is not a chain that binds, but a gift that is offered without strings. Practically, this looks like catching yourself when you feel the urge to check your partner's phone, or when you rehearse a speech in your head about how they should change. It means, in a moment of conflict, taking a breath and asking, am I reacting from a place of attachment and fear, or from a place of love and clarity? It involves regularly reflecting on your expectations and consciously releasing those that are unrealistic or controlling. It means learning to sit with the discomfort of not knowing how a relationship will evolve, trusting that your capacity to love is not dependent on its specific form. This journey of letting go in relationships is ongoing. Some days you will feel free and loving. Other days, old patterns of jealousy and neediness will arise. The practice is to meet all of it with compassion and gentle awareness, without self-judgment. Each time you choose to release a gripe, to forgive a slight, to accept a difference, or to wish someone well from a distance, you are strengthening the muscle of a love that is truly free. This is the culmination of all the previous practices: understanding impermanence, seeing through the self, practicing acceptance, and cultivating generosity, applied to the most intimate arena of human experience. It is how you learn to love without possessing, to care without clinging, and to hold another heart without imprisoning it or losing your own. Have you ever been going about your day, feeling perfectly fine, when suddenly a memory flashes into your mind? A past mistake, a harsh word from someone, a moment of embarrassment, and instantly your mood plummets? It is astonishing how a thought about something long finished can feel so vividly, painfully present, as if no time has passed at all. This is the weight of the past, an anchor dragging on the present moment, and learning to loosen its grip is essential for true freedom. Our attachment to what has already happened manifests primarily as regret and resentment, two sides of the same coin of suffering. Regret is the internal dialogue of self-recrimination, where we endlessly replay our own failures and poor choices, convinced that by punishing ourselves we can somehow change what occurred. Resentment is the external focus, where we harbour anger towards others for their actions, building walls around our hearts with stories of how we were wronged. Both are forms of clinging to mental formations that have ceased to exist in reality, yet we allow them to shape our current experience, creating a persistent undercurrent of dukkha, that subtle unsatisfactoriness. The past is not a place you can visit. It is a collection of memories, thoughts, and stories that you carry with you. The event itself is over, but your relationship to it is ongoing, and that relationship is often one of struggle and resistance. Letting go of the past is not an act of forgetting or denying what happened. To try and erase memory is futile and often leads to more suppression and tension. Instead, the path is one of forgiveness, a word that needs careful understanding here. Forgiveness, in the context of letting go, is not about condoning harmful behaviour, nor is it necessarily about reconciling with someone who hurt you. It is, first and foremost, an internal process of freeing yourself from the toxic residue of past events. It is a decision to stop drinking the poison of resentment and expecting the other person to suffer. You are the one who bears the cost of carrying that bitterness, day after day, while the other person may be entirely unaware or unchanged. Similarly, self-forgiveness is not about letting yourself off the hook for past actions. It is about releasing the relentless self-judgment that prevents you from moving forward. The profound teaching of impermanence. Anicca is your most powerful ally in this work. Everything is in a constant state of flux, including you and everyone else. The person you are today is not the same person who made that mistake 5 years ago, or even 5 months ago. Your cells have renewed, your thoughts have evolved, your understanding has deepened. The person who hurt you is also not the same. They are a different collection of conditions and experiences now. To cling fiercely to a snapshot of a past event and demand that it continue to define your present reality is to fight a phantom. It is like trying to hold onto a wave that has already crashed upon the shore and receded back into the ocean. The event itself is gone. Only the memory and the emotional charge you have attached to it remain. The first and often most challenging step is self-forgiveness. We can be our own harshest critics, holding on to guilt and shame with a tenacity that we would never inflict on another human being. We mistakenly believe that by continually punishing ourselves, we are making amends for our errors. But this self-flagellation does not undo the past. It only impoverishes the present. It creates a cycle where you feel unworthy of peace or happiness, which itself becomes a major obstacle to living a full life. To begin the process of self-forgiveness, you must start with radical acceptance. This means looking directly at the past action without flinching or making excuses. Acknowledge it clearly. I did that. It was a mistake. It caused harm. Do not shy away from the truth. Then, bring in a compassionate understanding. Investigate the conditions that were present at that time. What were you thinking? What were you feeling? What fears, insecurity, or ignorance were operating? See your past self not as a villain, but as a fallible human being who was acting from a place of confusion or pain. This perspective does not excuse the behaviour, but it allows for empathy to arise. From this place of empathy, you can then take responsible action. If possible, make amends to those you hurt. More importantly, make a sincere commitment to learn from the experience and to act differently in the future. This is how you transform a past mistake into a source of wisdom rather than a lifelong burden. Forgiving others follows a similar trajectory. It begins with fully acknowledging the hurt. Allow yourself to feel the anger, the sadness, or the betrayal without immediately trying to spiritualize it away. Say to yourself, what that person did was hurtful, and it is okay that I feel this pain. Give the emotion space to exist in your body. Feel where it resides, the tightness in your chest, the clenching in your stomach, Observe it with mindfulness, without getting swept away by the story of why it happened or how unfair it was. Then, introduce the lens of impermanence. Remember that the person who committed the act was a different version of themselves, acting from their own conditioning, their own suffering, their own limited awareness. This is not to minimize your pain, but to contextualize it. Their action was likely more about their inner world than it was about you. Holding onto resentment is like grasping a hot coal tightly in your hand. You are the one who gets burned. Letting go is an act of profound self-care and self-respect. It is reclaiming your power from the past. An immensely practical tool for this work is the meditation on loving kindness, known as metta bhavana. This practice is a methodical way to cultivate a forgiving and compassionate heart. You start by directing kind wishes toward yourself. Sit quietly and repeat phrases like, "May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I live with ease." This is the foundation. Especially if you struggle with self-condemnation, you are offering yourself the forgiveness and kindness you may feel you do not deserve. Then, you gradually extend these wishes outward. Bring to mind a benefactor, someone who has been good to you, and wish them well. Then a good friend. Then a neutral person, someone you see but have no strong feelings about. Finally, and this is the crucial part, bring to mind the person with whom you have a difficulty. Silently repeat the phrases for them. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. This is not about pretending they did nothing wrong or that you want to be best friends. It is about acknowledging their shared humanity and wishing for their freedom from the suffering that likely led them to act as they did. This practice can feel artificial or difficult at first, but with consistency, it softens the heart and loosens the knots of anger and resentment that tie you to the past. It helps you see that everyone, including yourself and those who have hurt you, is on a journey, trying to find happiness in a confusing world. Letting go of the past is not a one-time achievement. It is an ongoing process. There will be days when you feel light and free, and other days when an old memory will trigger a familiar wave of pain. The practice is to meet each occurrence with gentle awareness. When the memory arises, notice it. Name it, : there is that story again. Feel the accompanying emotion in your body without judgment. Then consciously choose to release it. You might say to yourself, "That was then. This is now. I am no longer bound by that." You are not erasing the memory from your mind. You are disarming it, removing the emotional sting that gives it power over your present peace. As you practice this, you will find that you reclaim a tremendous amount of mental and emotional energy that was previously devoted to maintaining the past. This energy becomes available for your life now, for your relationships, your passions, your growth. The past becomes a library of lessons learned, not a prison of pain. Forgiving yourself and others is the final step in cutting the chains to what has been, allowing you to participate fully and freely in the beauty and possibility of what is. After learning to gently untangle ourselves from the ghosts of the past, we often swing to the opposite extreme, finding ourselves caught in the relentless grip of the future. It is a peculiar kind of suffering, one that trades the solid weight of what was for the dizzying, phantom fear of what might be. Have you ever noticed your mind constructing elaborate, often terrifying, stories about events that have not happened and may never happen? This is the tyranny of anxiety, and at its core, it is simply another form of attachment, a desperate and futile attempt to control the uncontrollable. Anxiety is, in essence, the act of borrowing suffering from a future that is purely hypothetical. You are paying interest on a debt you may never owe, expending your present peace for a scenario that exists only in your imagination. This is not to say that all forethought is bad. There is a world of difference between wise planning and obsessive worry. Wise planning is a present moment activity. You are sitting down, looking at your calendar, and deciding what to do today to prepare for a meeting next week. That is a skillful, grounded action. Obsessive worry, on the other hand, is a mental projection. It is you lying in bed at night, vividly imagining the meeting going horribly wrong, feeling the flush of embarrassment, hearing the critical comments, all while you are safe in your own home. One is an action, the other is a mental movie that drains your energy and creates stress in the here and now. The practice of letting go of the future, therefore, is not about becoming irresponsible or failing to prepare. It is about recognizing when your mind has left the building and travelled into a fictional timeline, and then gently, patiently, guiding it back home to the only moment you can ever truly live in, the present. This is where mindfulness becomes your anchor. Every time you notice your mind spiralling into a what-if scenario, you simply acknowledge it without judgment. You say to yourself, there is worry, or planning is happening. You feel the physical sensations that accompany this mental time travel, the tightness in your chest, the shallow breathing, the restlessness, and then you bring your attention back to something immediate and real. It could be the feeling of your feet on the floor, the sound of the birds outside, or the simple movement of your breath. This is not a suppression of thought. It is a redirection of attention. You are not trying to stop the thoughts about the future. You are ceasing to fuel them with your focus. Each time you do this, you are weakening the neural pathway of anxiety and strengthening the muscle of present moment awareness. It is a repatterning of your mind, one gentle return at a time. A major fuel for this future-oriented anxiety is our attachment to expectations. We are constantly setting ourselves up for disappointment by pre-writing the script of how things should unfold. We expect our vacation to be perfectly relaxing, our presentation to be flawlessly received, our children to behave in a certain way. Expectations are, as the saying goes, premeditated resentments. They are resentments against reality for not conforming to our personal screenplay. When you hold a strong expectation, you are essentially trying to force life into a predetermined box. And life, in its beautiful, chaotic, and unpredictable nature, rarely complies. The crash when reality diverges from your expectation is where much of our suffering arises. Letting go of the future involves loosening our grip on these expectations. It means moving through life with intention, but without a rigid attachment to the outcome. You can set a goal to have a pleasant conversation with your partner, but you release the demand that it must unfold in a specific manner. You can work hard on a project, but you detach from the need for it to be met with universal praise. This open-handed approach allows life to surprise you. It creates space for spontaneity, for grace, for outcomes that are often better than anything you could have meticulously planned. It transforms life from a test you must pass into an adventure you get to experience. This does not mean you become passive or cease to care about results. It means you shift your primary focus from the uncontrollable outcome to the quality of your action in the present. You invest your energy fully in the process, in doing the work well, in speaking with kindness, in acting with integrity, and you trust that the results will take care of themselves, influenced by a million factors beyond your control. This is where a deep trust in the Dharma, or the natural law of cause and effect, comes in. You learn to trust that skillful actions tend to lead to wholesome results, but you also understand that the final outcome is a complex web of conditions. More importantly, You develop trust in your own capacity to respond skillfully to whatever arises. You realize that you do not need to know the future to be okay, because you have confidence in your ability to handle the present moment, no matter what it brings. This is a trust built on self-knowledge and practiced resilience, not on blind faith. When you stop trying to control the future, you discover a profound peace that is not dependent on external circumstances. The mental energy that was once consumed by weaving anxious stories and managing expectations is suddenly freed up. This energy becomes available for creative action, for deep connection with others, and for simply being alive right now. You find that you are more effective in your actions because you are not paralyzed by the fear of failure or intoxicated by the desire for success. Your mind is clearer, your decisions are wiser, and your responses are more measured because they come from a place of centered presence, not from a reactive state of fear or hope. The future ceases to be a threat and becomes simply the next unfolding moment. You learn to meet it with curiosity and openness, ready to engage with whatever is presented, without the baggage of a pre-written script. This is the freedom that comes from releasing the future. It is the ability to participate fully in the dance of life, step by step, without needing to know the entire choreography in advance. You become like a surfer riding a wave, responsive and adaptive, using the energy of the present rather than fighting against the ocean of time. The anxiety may still arise sometimes. It is an old, familiar habit, but now you have the tools to meet it, to see it for what it is, and to choose, again and again, to come back to the solid ground of the now. And in that now, you find all the resources, all the peace, and all the life you will ever need. You have probably felt it, that subtle shift in your energy when you walk into a room and wonder what people are thinking about you, or the sinking feeling when you receive a piece of criticism, or even the fleeting high of a compliment. While we have been working on letting go of the past and the future, there is a very present and social dimension of attachment that can be just as binding: our attachment to our public image, our relentless need for approval, and our deep-seated fear of disapproval. This is not about healthy social connection. It is about the compulsive need to manage how others perceive us, to be seen in a certain light, and to avoid any negative judgment at all costs. This craving for praise and this aversion to blame are two sides of the very same coin, and that coin is the identification with a fragile, constructed idea of who we are in the eyes of the world. We build up this persona, this social mask, and then we spend an enormous amount of energy defending it, polishing it, and worrying about it. We post something online and then anxiously check for likes. We rehearse conversations in our heads, trying to anticipate how to present ourselves in the best possible way. We hesitate to speak our truth or pursue a passion because we are afraid of what people might say. This constant outsourcing of our self-worth is a recipe for a specific kind of suffering, a pervasive dukkha, because it places your happiness and sense of okayness squarely in the hands of other people, whose opinions are fickle, changing, and entirely beyond your control. One person praises you today, another criticizes you tomorrow, and your inner world becomes a roller coaster you never meant to ride. The root of this problem, like so many others, is the illusion of a solid, separate self. The practice of anatta, or non-self, is absolutely fundamental here. When you investigate your experience, you find that this public image is not a thing. It is a collection of thoughts, perceptions, and mental formations. It is a story you tell yourself and that you believe others are telling about you. But if there is no permanent, independent you at the centre, then what is there to defend? What is this image but a transient, empty concept? The person who is praised is not the same as the person who is blamed. Both are fleeting moments in a flowing stream of experience. When you start to see this clearly, through mindfulness and inquiry, the need to protect this phantom self starts to loosen. You begin to realize that you are not your reputation, you are not your LinkedIn profile, and you are not the aggregate of all the nice or nasty things people have said about you. This does not mean you become socially reckless or indifferent to others. It means you stop building your identity on such unstable ground. To support this shift, the Buddhist ethical precepts, or sila, provide a crucial internal foundation. When you commit to living ethically, to avoiding harm, to being truthful, to not taking what is not given, to practicing sexual responsibility, and to avoiding intoxication of mind, you build a deep, internal sense of integrity. You know, in your core, that you are acting in alignment with your values. When you have that inner compass, the opinions of others, whether praise or blame, simply lose much of their power. If someone criticizes you for an action you know was undertaken with good intention and ethical care, the criticism may still sting, but it does not devastate you. It does not shake your fundamental sense of worth because that worth is no longer dependent on external validation. You can consider the feedback, learn from it if it is useful, and let the rest go without it defining you. Another powerful, though perhaps unsettling, practice for letting go of the public image is the contemplation of death, known as maranasati. This is not meant to be morbid, but to bring a profound sense of perspective. When you regularly reflect on the fact that this life is finite, that your body will age and die, and that all of these social games are ultimately temporary, what becomes truly important? On your deathbed, are you going to be thinking about that one negative comment you received on social media 20 years ago? Or are you going to be reflecting on the love you gave, the truth you spoke, the moments you were fully alive and authentic? This contemplation cuts through the triviality of social posturing and reminds you of the raw, precious reality of your brief time here. It helps you to stop sweating the small stuff, and much of our concern over public image is, in the grand scheme, very small stuff. As you practice letting go of this need for approval, something beautiful and liberating begins to happen. You discover a freedom to be more authentically yourself. You can wear what you want without needing it to signal anything to anyone. You can pursue a creative project that feels true to you, even if it is not trendy or popular. You can speak your mind in a meeting, not to impress your boss, but to contribute your genuine perspective. You can admit when you are wrong without it feeling like a catastrophic failure of your entire persona. This authenticity is magnetic. It attracts people who resonate with your real self, not the curated version you use to project. Your relationships become more honest and meaningful because they are based on who you actually are, not on who you are trying to be. This journey is not about becoming a hermit or rejecting society. It is about learning to participate in the social world from a place of inner freedom rather than outer compulsion. You can still enjoy a compliment, but you do not need it to feel good about yourself. You can still feel the pinch of criticism, but you do not spiral into self-doubt. You hold it all lightly. You engage with the world, but you are no longer a slave to its opinions. This is the ultimate freedom in this realm, the freedom to be yourself, fully and unapologetically, knowing that your worth is inherent and not something that can be given or taken away by the applause or the silence of the crowd. It is about reclaiming the energy you spent on managing perceptions and pouring it into living a life that is true, meaningful, and deeply your own. You have probably felt it, that subtle shift in your energy when you walk into a room and wonder what people are thinking about you, or the sinking feeling when you receive a piece of criticism, or even the fleeting high of a compliment. While we have been working on letting go of the past and the future, there is a very present and social dimension of attachment that can be just as binding: our attachment to our public image. our relentless need for approval, and our deep-seated fear of disapproval. This is not about healthy social connection. It is about the compulsive need to manage how others perceive us, to be seen in a certain light, and to avoid any negative judgment at all costs. This craving for praise and this aversion to blame are two sides of the very same coin. And that coin is the identification with a fragile, constructed idea of who we are in the eyes of the world. We build up this persona, this social mask, and then we spend an enormous amount of energy defending it, polishing it, and worrying about it. We post something online and then anxiously check for likes. We rehearse conversations in our heads, trying to anticipate how to present ourselves in the best possible way. We hesitate to speak our truth or pursue a passion because we are afraid of what people might say. This constant outsourcing of our self-worth is a recipe for a specific kind of suffering, a pervasive dukkha, because it places your happiness and sense of okayness squarely in the hands of other people, whose opinions are fickle, changing, and entirely beyond your control. One person praises you today, another criticizes you tomorrow, and your inner world becomes a roller coaster you never meant to ride. The root of this problem, like so many others, is the illusion of a solid, separate self. The practice of anatta, or non-self, is absolutely fundamental here. When you investigate your experience, you find that this public image is not a thing. It is a collection of thoughts, perceptions, and mental formations. It is a story you tell yourself and that you believe others are telling about you. But if there is no permanent, independent you at the center, then what is there to defend? What is this image but a transient, empty concept? The person who is praised is not the same as the person who is blamed. Both are fleeting moments in a flowing stream of experience. When you start to see this clearly, through mindfulness and inquiry, the need to protect this phantom self starts to loosen. You begin to realize that you are not your reputation, you are not your LinkedIn profile, and you are not the aggregate of all the nice or nasty things people have said about you. This does not mean you become socially reckless or indifferent to others. It means you stop building your identity on such unstable ground. To support this shift, the Buddhist ethical precepts, or sila, provide a crucial internal foundation. When you commit to living ethically, to avoiding harm, to being truthful, to not taking what is not given, to practicing sexual responsibility, and to avoiding intoxication of mind, you build a deep, internal sense of integrity. You know, in your core, that you are acting in alignment with your values. When you have that inner compass, the opinions of others, whether praise or blame, simply lose much of their power. If someone criticizes you for an action you know was undertaken with good intention and ethical care, the criticism may still sting, but it does not devastate you. It does not shake your fundamental sense of worth, because that worth is no longer dependent on external validation. You can consider the feedback, learn from it if it is useful, and let the rest go without it defining you. Another powerful, though perhaps unsettling, practice for letting go of the public image is the contemplation of death, known as maranasati. This is not meant to be morbid, but to bring a profound sense of perspective. When you regularly reflect on the fact that this life is finite, that your body will age and die, and that all of these social games are ultimately temporary, what becomes truly important? On your deathbed, are you going to be thinking about that one negative comment you received on social media 20 years ago? Or are you going to be reflecting on the love you gave, the truth you spoke, the moments you were fully alive and authentic? This contemplation cuts through the triviality of social posturing and reminds you of the raw, precious reality of your brief time here. It helps you to stop sweating the small stuff and much of our concern over public image is, in the grand scheme, very small stuff. As you practice letting go of this need for approval, something beautiful and liberating begins to happen. You discover a freedom to be more authentically yourself. You can wear what you want without needing it to signal anything to anyone. You can pursue a creative project that feels true to you, even if it is not trendy or popular. You can speak your mind in a meeting, not to impress your boss, but to contribute your genuine perspective. You can admit when you are wrong without it feeling like a catastrophic failure of your entire persona. This authenticity is magnetic. It attracts people who resonate with your real self, not the curated version you use to project. Your relationships become more honest and meaningful because they are based on who you actually are, not on who you are trying to be. This journey is not about becoming a hermit or rejecting society. It is about learning to participate in the social world from a place of inner freedom rather than outer compulsion. You can still enjoy a compliment, but you do not need it to feel good about yourself. You can still feel the pinch of criticism, but you do not spiral into self-doubt. You hold it all lightly. You engage with the world, but you are no longer a slave to its opinions. This is the ultimate freedom in this realm, the freedom to be yourself, fully and unapologetically, knowing that your worth is inherent and not something that can be given or taken away by the applause or the silence of the crowd. It is about reclaiming the energy you spent on managing perceptions and pouring it into living a life that is true, meaningful, and deeply your own. After freeing yourself from the constant worry about what others think, you might find that another major arena where attachment plays out is in your work and career. This is where we often tie our sense of self-worth directly to our performance, our job title, our salary, and the recognition we receive. We live in a culture that glorifies busyness and measures success by external milestones, promotions, raises, and prestigious projects. It is incredibly easy to fall into the trap of believing that your value as a person is equivalent to your productivity or your professional achievements. This attachment to outcomes, to the fruits of your labor, is a massive source of stress, anxiety, and burnout. You push yourself relentlessly, not for the love of the work itself, but for the validation you hope to gain from a successful result. When things go well, you feel temporarily good about yourself, but that feeling is fragile and dependent on the next success. When things do not go well, when a project fails or you receive criticism, it can feel like a personal attack, a fundamental failure of your very identity. This creates a roller coaster of emotions where your inner peace is held hostage by external circumstances you cannot fully control. The practice of letting go in your work life is not about becoming lazy or unambitious. It is about shifting your focus from the unpredictable outcome to the quality of your action in the present moment. This concept, often associated with the idea of right action without attachment to fruits, encourages you to pour your entire energy and skill into the task at hand, to do your very best, and then to release your grip on what happens next. You commit to the process, not the prize. This means you show up fully for your work. You engage with it wholeheartedly. You use your talents and intelligence to the best of your ability, but you do not stake your happiness on the final result. You understand that the outcome of any endeavor is influenced by a countless number of factors: market conditions, other people's decisions, sheer luck, and timing, most of which are entirely beyond your influence. When you internalize this, failure loses its power to define you. A failed project is no longer a verdict on your worth. It becomes simply feedback. It is information you can use to learn, adapt, and try again with more wisdom. It is data, not destiny. This perspective fosters incredible resilience. Instead of being paralyzed by the fear of making a mistake, you are free to experiment, to innovate, and to take calculated risks. Creativity flourishes in this environment because your mind is not constricted by the anxiety of whether your idea will be a smash hit or a total flop. You can pursue ideas that are genuinely interesting and meaningful to you, rather than only those you are sure will bring external rewards. Similarly, success, when it comes, is enjoyed but not clung to. You can appreciate the praise, the bonus, or the promotion without letting it inflate your ego or become the new baseline for your happiness. You see it for what it is, a pleasant event that is also impermanent. This prevents the complacency that often follows achievement and the inevitable letdown when the excitement fades. Your sense of self remains stable and grounded, not tossed about by the winds of professional fortune. How do you actually practice this in your daily work life? It begins with mindfulness and intention. At the start of your workday, or before beginning a specific task, take a moment to set your intention. Remind yourself, my goal is to engage with this work to the best of my ability, with integrity and focus. The result is not in my hands. Throughout the day, when you notice yourself getting anxious about a deadline, obsessing over a performance review, or fantasizing about a future promotion, gently bring your attention back to the present moment. Feel the keyboard under your fingers, notice the content of the report you are writing, and fully immerse yourself in the single action you are performing right now. When a thought about the outcome arises, acknowledge it. There is worry about the result, and then let it pass like a cloud, returning your focus to the work itself. Another key aspect is to redefine what right action means for you. It is not just about completing tasks. It is about acting with ethics, kindness, and skill. Are you treating your colleagues with respect? Are you communicating honestly? Are you using your time and resources wisely? When you know you are acting in alignment with your values, you build an internal foundation of self-respect that is independent of external success or failure. This inner integrity becomes your anchor. Furthermore, practice detaching your identity from your job title. You are not your senior manager or assistant role. These are temporary hats you wear, functions you perform. Your essential worth as a human being is not diminished if you are laid off or if you decide to change careers. This understanding can be liberating, especially in an unstable economy. It allows you to navigate career transitions with more grace and less panic, because your core identity remains intact. The benefits of this approach are profound. You will likely find that your work becomes more enjoyable because you are no longer burdened by the heavy weight of expectation. Your decision-making improves because it comes from a place of clarity and purpose rather than fear or greed. Your relationships at work become more genuine and collaborative because you are not viewing everyone as a competitor or a stepping stone. You become a more effective leader or team member because you can focus on supporting others and achieving collective goals without being derailed by personal agendas. Ultimately, letting go in your career is about trusting the process of life itself. You do your part. You offer your unique gifts to the world, and you trust that the universe will handle the rest. This does not mean you stop having goals or aspirations. It means you hold them lightly. You work toward them with passion and dedication. But you are not devastated if the path takes an unexpected turn. You remain open to opportunities you never could have planned for. This state of engaged detachment brings a deep and lasting peace to your professional life. It transforms work from a source of stress and self-definition into a channel for creative expression, service, and continuous learning. You become like a gardener who tends to the plants with care and attention, providing water, sunlight, and nutrients, but without trying to force the seeds to sprout before their time. You understand that growth happens according to its own rhythm and conditions. You do your work, and you let life handle the outcomes. In this space, you discover a freedom that allows you to contribute your best to the world without burning out, and to find meaning in the work itself, regardless of the harvest. So, after finding that sense of freedom in your work, where your value is no longer tied to outcomes, you might notice another, even more subtle layer of attachment that colours your entire world: the beliefs and opinions you hold about everything. It is one thing to let go of material things or career results, but it is another to loosen the grip on the very thoughts and viewpoints that you consider to be you. Have you ever found yourself in a heated discussion, feeling your body tense and your heart rate increase, all because someone challenged a deeply held opinion of yours? That visceral reaction is a clear sign of attachment, and it is perhaps the most insidious and pervasive form of clinging we engage in. We do not just have opinions. We often feel that we are our opinions. We identify so completely with our points of view about politics, religion, morality, other people, or even ourselves, that any challenge to them feels like a personal attack. This attachment to views is not just a minor mental habit. It is the root of a vast amount of the conflict and suffering in the world, from petty arguments between friends to large-scale political and religious wars. When we are fused with our beliefs, we stop seeing other people as individuals with their own valid experiences and instead see them as representatives of an opposing ideology that must be defeated. This creates walls between us and prevents genuine understanding and connection. The problem is that our beliefs are not solid, timeless truths. They are mental constructions, assembled from our past experiences, cultural conditioning, and the information we have been exposed to. They are like maps we use to navigate the world, but we often mistake the map for the territory itself. We cling to these maps long after the landscape has changed, and we fight anyone who suggests a different route. The path of wisdom in this context is not about finding the one right belief system to cling to, but about cultivating a mind that is open, curious, and willing to question everything, including its own most cherished assumptions. This is not a path of uncertainty or nihilism. It is a path of profound investigation and learning. The historical figure at the heart of this philosophy famously encouraged his followers not to blindly believe anything he said, but to come and see for themselves. He invited a spirit of open inquiry and personal verification. This is the attitude we are encouraged to bring to all of our views. Instead of holding onto them as fixed identities, we can learn to hold them lightly, as provisional tools or working hypotheses. We can ask ourselves, is this belief useful? Does it reduce suffering and promote well-being for myself and others? Is it aligned with reality as I experience it? And most importantly, we must be willing to let a belief go when new evidence or a more skillful understanding presents itself. This requires a great deal of humility and courage. It means being okay with not knowing, with saying, I was wrong, and with changing your mind. It means recognizing that all views are limited and conditional. A political opinion that made sense in one context may be harmful in another. A scientific theory that was once state-of-the-art is eventually superseded by new discoveries. Our personal stories about who we are and what happened to us are just that, stories which are interpretations and not the raw events themselves. When we hold our views lightly, we can engage in discussions without the need to be right. We can listen to others not to find flaws in their arguments, but to truly understand their perspective. We can learn from anyone because we are not filtering everything through a rigid screen of what we already believe. This open-mindedness is actively cultivated through meditation, specifically through the practice of what is often called beginner's mind. This is the mind that is fresh and open to each moment, free from the preconceptions and judgments of the past. When you sit in meditation, you are practicing this. You observe your thoughts and feelings as they arise. but you do not grab onto them or build identities around them. You see a thought of anger and you note anger without adding the story, and I am an angry person. You see a memory and you note remembering without getting lost in the narrative. This practice of bare attention helps to create a gap between you and your mental content. You start to see that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that knows the thoughts. This fundamental shift in perception is what allows you to hold opinions without being held by them. In your daily life, you can practice this by bringing a beginner's mind to ordinary activities. When you walk down a familiar street, try to see it as if for the first time, noticing the colours, the sounds, the smells, without labelling it as my street or a boring place. When you talk to a family member, try to listen to them as if you have never heard their story before, with fresh curiosity and without anticipating what they will say. When you read a news article that contradicts your beliefs, make a conscious effort to read it with an open mind, simply to understand the perspective, without immediately preparing a rebuttal. This does not mean you become gullible or agree with everything you hear. Discernment is still crucial. You can still have strong convictions and take a stand for what you believe is right. But the quality of that conviction changes. It comes from a place of careful consideration and compassion, not from a rigid, defensive ego. You can advocate for your view while still respecting the person who holds a different one, because you see that they, too, are operating from their own conditioning and their own search for happiness. The ultimate fruit of this practice is the emergence of true wisdom. When the mind is empty of fixed concepts and opinions, it becomes like a clear mirror, able to reflect reality directly, without distortion. It can perceive the subtle, ever-changing flow of life in its full complexity and freshness. This wisdom is not a collection of knowledge. It is a way of being and seeing that is responsive, adaptive, and deeply peaceful. You are no longer at war with reality because you are not trying to force it into the boxes of your beliefs. You can meet each moment with intelligence and grace, responding appropriately to what is actually happening, rather than reacting from a script written by your past. Letting go of beliefs is perhaps the final and most liberating form of detachment. It frees you from the internal conflict of constantly having to defend your mental territory. It opens the door to genuine dialogue, deep learning, and a heart that is open to all of life's expressions. You discover that you can navigate the world with confidence and clarity without needing the false security of rigid opinions. Your identity is no longer built on the shifting sand of what you think, but on the solid ground of present moment awareness itself. This is the freedom of a mind that is truly open, a mind that is always learning, growing, and flowing with the boundless mystery of existence. So, after exploring the freedom of an open mind, you might be wondering if this journey of letting go is a solitary one, something you have to figure out all by yourself in a quiet room. It is a common misconception that non-attachment is a lonely, antisocial pursuit, but nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, the spiritual community, known as the Sangha, is one of the 3 essential pillars of the path, providing a crucial container and a living, breathing support system, without which the process of release would be far more difficult and far less joyful. When you are trying to untangle yourself from deep-seated habits of clinging and aversion, doing it entirely alone can feel like trying to lift yourself out of quicksand. The Sangha is the solid ground and the helping hands that pull you out. It is the group of people who are walking the same path, who share your values of mindfulness, compassion, and freedom, and who provide a real-world context where letting go is not just a theory, but a shared, daily practice. This community offers something you cannot get from books or solitary meditation: tangible support and heartfelt encouragement. On days when your motivation is low and your old patterns feel overwhelming, seeing someone else in the Sangha living with lightness and joy, embodying the very qualities you are cultivating, is incredibly inspiring. It is one thing to read about non-attachment. It is another to have a friend who can laugh easily when their plans fall apart, or who can sit with you in your grief without trying to fix it, showing you through their own being that it is possible to live this way. They become living examples, proof that a life of less clinging is not a life of less joy, but rather one of more profound and reliable peace. Being surrounded by such people creates what you might think of as a positive force field that makes it easier to let go of the conditioned habits of mainstream culture. In the wider world, you are constantly bombarded with messages that reinforce attachment. Advertisements telling you that you need more stuff to be happy, social media encouraging you to craft a perfect image, and a general culture of busyness and achievement that equates your worth with your output. It is exhausting to swim against that current alone. But within the Sangha, the current is flowing in the other direction. Here, the values are simplicity over consumption, authenticity over image, and presence over productivity. This shared environment normalizes a different way of being. You can show up without your social mask, without your stories of success and failure, and be accepted for who you are in this moment. This collective energy supports your individual efforts, making it feel natural to choose contentment over craving, and to let go of things you once thought were essential. Perhaps the most challenging and therefore most fruitful aspect of the Sangha is that it constantly confronts your attachment to your own ego. Community life is not always easy or comfortable. It is filled with other human beings, each with their own quirks, opinions, and habits. Someone in the group might irritate you. Someone else might have a practice or belief that challenges your own. This is not a bug. It is a feature. These interactions are designed by life itself to sand down the rough edges of your ego. They demand that you practice patience when you would rather be impatient, tolerance when you would rather judge, and the ability to yield or compromise when you would rather insist on having your own way. These are not abstract virtues. They are the very practical, nitty-gritty skills of non-attachment, learning to let go of your need to be right, your need for others to behave a certain way, or your resentment when they do not. This is the core curriculum of the Sangha. It is a relentless and compassionate training ground where your ego gets a workout, and where you learn to release your grip on your personal preferences and stories, not in isolation, but in the messy, beautiful reality of human relationship. Another vital function of the community is to provide a space where you can share your struggles openly. The path of letting go has its ups and downs. There will be days when you feel you are regressing, when old attachments rear their heads with surprising strength, or when a loss triggers a wave of grief that makes non-attachment feel like a distant dream. If you try to navigate this alone, it is easy to feel like you are failing, like you are the only one who finds this difficult. But in the Sangha, you can voice these challenges to spiritual friends who understand. You can say, "I am really struggling with jealousy right now," or "I cannot seem to let go of this grudge." And instead of receiving judgment, you receive empathy and shared stories. This normalizes the difficulties. You realize that everyone goes through this. It is part of the process. This sharing dramatically reduces the sense of isolation that can make spiritual practice feel lonely and burdensome. It transforms your personal struggles into shared human experiences. And in doing so, it lightens the load immensely. You are not alone in your effort to be free. Ultimately, the Sangha serves as a practical laboratory for learning to relate to others from a place of interconnection rather than from need and attachment. In most of our relationships, we are often trying to get something, validation, security, love, or a sense of completion. We use people to fill our own emptiness, and this creates relationships based on dependency and fear. The Sangha is a place to practice a different kind of relationship. Here, the ideal is to connect from the understanding of our fundamental interdependence, a concept known as pratitya samutpada. This means seeing that we are all part of a vast, interconnected web of life, and that your well-being and my well-being are not separate. In this context, you learn to care for others not because you need them to make you happy, but because their happiness is inseparable from your own. You learn to give support without expectation of return, and to receive support without feeling indebted. This is the essence of relational non-attachment, being deeply connected and caring deeply, but without the clinging, demanding, and controlling that usually characterize our interactions. It is in this laboratory that you learn to love freely, to offer compassion unconditionally, and to engage with the world from a heart that is full and open, rather than needy and closed. The community, therefore, is not a luxury or an add-on to the path of letting go. It is an indispensable part of its very structure. It provides the mirror, the support, the challenge, and the practical training ground that makes the profound internal shift of non-attachment possible, sustainable, and deeply joyful. It turns a potentially lonely philosophical idea into a lived, shared reality, reminding you that while the journey inward is personal, you do not have to walk it alone. Have you ever noticed how the most inspired moments in your life often arrive not when you are desperately striving for them, but in a quiet pause, a moment of release? It is as if creativity itself is a shy creature that only emerges when we stop chasing it. This beautiful intersection is where the practice of letting go meets the flow of creative expression, and it reveals a profound secret. Our attachment to outcomes is often the very thing that blocks the natural wellspring of inspiration within us. Think about a time you sat down to write, paint, or compose music, and found yourself staring at a blank page, paralyzed. That blockage rarely comes from a lack of skill or ideas. It usually stems from a deep-seated attachment to the result. You are afraid of creating something bad or mediocre. You are attached to the desire for recognition, hoping your work will be praised and admired. You compare your nascent creation to the finished masterpieces of others, and the weight of that comparison crushes your own unique voice before it can even whisper. This is the ego in its most creative, disruptive form, turning what should be a joyful process into a high-stakes test of your worth. The state that artists and thinkers describe as flow is, in its essence, a state of profound non-attachment. In flow, you are so fully immersed in the doing that the sense of a separate you who is creating temporarily dissolves. There is no longer a critic judging each brushstroke, no manager worrying about the commercial viability of the melody, no storyteller fretting over how the audience will receive the narrative. There is just the action itself, unfolding spontaneously and effortlessly. Time distorts, self-consciousness vanishes, and the work seems to pour through you rather than from you. This is not a mysterious, random event. It is the natural state of the human mind when it is free from the constraints of attachment and aversion. It is what happens when you stop trying to control the creative process and instead become a willing participant in it. The practices we have been exploring are directly designed to cultivate this state. The meditation practice of calming the mind, known as samatha, is like clearing a cluttered workspace. You sit, you focus on your breath or a simple object, and you gently let go of the endless stream of thoughts, plans, and worries. This is not about suppressing thought, but about creating space and silence within. It is in this inner quiet that the seeds of genuine inspiration can germinate. Then, the practice of insightful awareness, or vipassana, allows you to observe the nature of your creative impulses without getting swept away by them. You see an idea arise. You notice the accompanying fear or excitement, and you let it all be without immediately acting on it or rejecting it. This creates a gap, a moment of choice, where you can respond to inspiration from a place of clarity rather than react from a place of craving or fear. This combination of a calm mind and a clear, observing awareness creates the perfect internal environment for creativity to flourish. You are no longer an anxious controller, micromanaging every detail and forcing outcomes. Instead, you learn to become a clear channel, a conduit for the creativity that is inherent in the universe itself. You start to trust that ideas will come, that solutions will present themselves, and that your role is to show up, be present, and do the work without imposing your will too forcefully on the process. This requires a deep trust in life itself, a faith that you are part of a larger, intelligent flow that you can tap into when you are open and receptive. And this approach also involves embracing the impermanence of all creative work. Every project, from a simple sketch to a grand symphony, has a life cycle. It is born from an initial spark of inspiration. It lives and grows through the process of execution, and it eventually comes to an end, whether that means being completed, abandoned, or shared with the world. The attached artist struggles with every stage. They cling to the initial perfect vision and get frustrated when the reality of the work does not match it. They resist the natural ending, endlessly tweaking and perfecting, unable to let the work go and move on. The artist practicing non-attachment understands this cycle. They appreciate the birth of the idea. They engage fully with the messy, beautiful process of giving it form. And then, when the time is right, they are willing to let it go. They complete the painting and sign it. They publish the book. They release the song into the world. This letting go is an essential part of the creative act. It creates room for the next project, the next inspiration to arise. If you are still clinging to your last creation, whether out of pride or dissatisfaction, you are blocking the flow of what wants to come next. This is why some of the most prolific artists are often those who have learned to detach from their work, seeing each piece as a step in a continuous journey of exploration rather than a definitive statement of their identity. The result of this practice is a more authentic and less self-conscious form of expression. When you are not creating for external validation or to avoid internal criticism, you are free to create from a place of genuine curiosity and passion. Your work becomes more original because it is not a copy of what you think will sell or what others will approve of. It is a true expression of your unique perspective, unfiltered by the demands of the ego. The process itself becomes the primary reward. The joy is found in the act of mixing colours, in the rhythm of typing words, in the struggle and breakthrough of solving a creative problem. The final product is still important, of course, but it is not the sole source of your satisfaction. Your happiness is no longer held hostage by the critics or the market. You can create because you feel compelled to, because it is a part of who you are, and because the act of bringing something new into the world is, in itself, a deeply fulfilling and meaningful endeavour. This does not mean that you will never face creative blocks again, but when you do, you will have the tools to meet them. You will recognise the block as a sign of attachment, perhaps to a particular outcome, or to a self-image as a good artist. You can then gently apply the practices of letting go, returning to the breath, observing the fear without judgment, and reconnecting with the simple joy of the process. Creativity becomes a practice, a meditation in action, and a powerful way to experience the freedom that comes from living with an open hand and a heart willing to engage with the world without needing to possess or control it. In this space, you discover that you are at your most creative not when you are trying hardest, but when you are most fully and freely yourself. So, after exploring how letting go can unlock your creative flow and bring a new sense of freedom to your expression, it is completely normal to hit a wall, to find that for every 2 steps forward, there is sometimes a step back. Understanding the concept of non-attachment intellectually is one thing. Actually living it, especially when old habits and deep-seated patterns rise up, is where the real work begins. This is where we encounter the obstacles, the internal roadblocks that can make the path of letting go feel frustratingly difficult. These are not signs that you are doing it wrong. They are an expected and integral part of the journey itself. The ancient teachings categorize these common obstacles into 5 classic hindrances, which are like mental states that cloud your awareness and make it hard to see clearly, and therefore hard to let go. The first 2 are perhaps the most obvious: sensual desire and ill will. Sensual desire is that pulling, grasping energy that says, "I need that to be happy." It is not just about physical objects. It is the craving for pleasant experiences, for certain feelings, for validation, for entertainment. Anything that the mind believes will bring satisfaction when you are trying to let go of a possession or a habit. This desire can roar back with surprising force, making you doubt your decision and convincing you that you cannot be content without that thing. Ill will, or aversion, is its opposite: the pushing away, the "I don't want this" reaction. It is the resentment, anger, frustration, and avoidance we feel towards unpleasant experiences, people, or even our own uncomfortable emotions. Letting go often requires accepting what is, but aversion screams for rejection, creating internal conflict and resistance that tightens your grip rather than loosening it. Then there is the hindrance of sloth and torpor, which often disguises itself as reasonable fatigue or "I will deal with this tomorrow." It is a heavy, dull, lethargic state of mind and body that drains your motivation to practice. You might sit down to meditate and feel too sleepy, or you might intend to contemplate impermanence but find your mind is foggy and uninterested. This inertia is a subtle form of clinging to comfort, to ease, to the familiar numbness of not engaging. It is the mind's way of avoiding the effort required for awareness and release. Closely related is restlessness and worry, an agitated, jumpy energy that makes it impossible to sit still with your experience. Your mind races from one thought to another, replaying past conversations, worrying about future tasks, feeling generally anxious and unsettled. This state is the antithesis of the quiet, mindful observation needed to see attachment clearly. How can you notice the subtle arising of clinging if your mind is a chaotic whirlwind? Restlessness prevents the stillness required to actually witness the mechanics of letting go in real time. Finally, there is skeptical doubt, which can be one of the most paralyzing obstacles. This is not healthy inquiry, but a corrosive uncertainty that undermines your confidence. You start doubting the path itself. Is this really working? Maybe this letting go stuff is just a fantasy. You doubt your own capacity. I am not cut out for this. I will never be able to change. This doubt can freeze you in your tracks, making you abandon practice just when you might be on the verge of a breakthrough. It is a voice that says freedom is for other people, not for you. Now, knowing these obstacles is the first step, but the crucial work is in learning how to work with them skillfully. This is not about declaring war on yourself and trying to violently suppress these states. That would just be another form of aversion and struggle. Instead, the path involves applying a combination of energetic effort, patient endurance, and keen discernment. Energy, or effort, is the quality of persistence and sustained application. It is the willingness to gently but consistently bring your attention back again and again when desire pulls it away or when sloth makes it dull. It is the courage to sit with aversion instead of immediately acting out or suppressing it. This effort is not a grim, teeth-gritting force. It is more like the steady, nurturing effort of a gardener tending to plants, knowing that growth takes time. Patience is its essential partner. The path of letting go is not linear. You will have good days and bad days. Old patterns you thought you had released might resurface during times of stress. Patience is the quality that allows you to meet these fluctuations without despair or self-recrimination. It is the understanding that transformation is a process, and it is okay to move at your own pace. It is giving yourself permission to be a learner, to make mistakes, and to simply begin again without a harsh internal critic. Discernment is the wisdom to know which antidote to apply in which situation. It is like having a toolbox and knowing which tool to use for a specific job. For the hindrance of sensual desire, the antidote might be reflecting on the drawbacks of clinging, really contemplating how that object of desire has caused suffering in the past, and how its pleasure is fleeting and unreliable. For aversion, the antidote might be actively cultivating loving kindness or compassion, first towards yourself and then towards the object of your aversion, to soften the heart and dissolve the resistance. For sloth and torpor, the antidote is often to energize the mind and body. This could mean doing some gentle movement or walking meditation, shifting your meditation object to something more vivid, or simply refreshing your determination. For restlessness and worry, the antidote is to calm and ground the mind. Focusing on a single, neutral anchor, like the breath, can help tether the restless energy. Practicing acceptance of the agitated state itself, without adding more fuel to it, can allow it to settle. And for skeptical doubt, the antidote is investigation and learning, studying the teachings, listening to others who have walked the path, and most importantly, relying on your own small, direct experiences of freedom can build confidence. When you have a moment where you let go of a small grudge and feel immediate relief, or when you choose not to buy something on impulse and discover a sense of lightness, treasure those moments. They are evidence that it is possible. Throughout this entire process, perhaps the most important practice is to apply letting go to the obstacles themselves. This is the ultimate irony and the key to the path. When you feel desire, can you let go of the story that you must fulfill it? When you feel aversion, can you let go of the need to push it away? When you feel lazy, can you let go of the judgment about being lazy? When you feel restless, can you let go of the struggle against restlessness? And when you feel doubt, can you let go of the identification with that doubt? This is the practice of non-attachment towards your own failures in non-attachment. It is a meta skill that prevents you from creating a new layer of suffering on top of the original obstacle. Be compassionate with yourself. The mind has been conditioned for a lifetime, or many lifetimes, to cling and to crave. It will not change overnight. There will be moments of clarity and ease, and there will be moments of confusion and contraction. The goal is not to become a perfect, obstacle-free being, but to learn how to relate to all these states with wisdom and kindness, to see them as passing weather patterns in the sky of your awareness. They come and they go. Your job is not to stop the weather, but to learn how to dance in the rain, to find shelter without denying the storm, and to trust that the sun is always there behind the clouds. This gentle, persistent, and compassionate approach is what gradually wears down the obstacles, not through force, but through understanding and consistent, loving attention. It is how the path unfolds, one mindful breath, one small release, dot, at a time. After navigating the inevitable obstacles and learning to meet them with patience and discernment, we arrive at the final destination of this entire journey, the ultimate letting go that makes all the previous practices culminate in a state of unshakable freedom. This is not a physical place you go to, but a fundamental shift in how you experience reality itself, known as nirvana. It is crucial to understand that nirvana is not some heavenly paradise you enter after you die. That is a common misunderstanding. Instead, it is a present moment reality, the complete extinguishing of the three primary fires that have been fueling all our suffering: the fire of attachment or craving, the fire of aversion or hatred, and the fire of ignorance or delusion. Imagine a candle flame that has been burning relentlessly. Nirvana is the moment the flame is snuffed out, not the candle itself being destroyed. The candle, which represents your mind and heart, remains, but now it is cool, peaceful, and free from the constant heat of wanting, rejecting, and misunderstanding. This is the most radical and profound act of letting go possible. The release of the entire cycle of conditioned existence, called samsara, which is characterized by birth, suffering, and death. It is letting go of the very mechanism that creates a sense of a separate, solid I that needs to protect itself and chase after things. This does not mean you become nothing or that you are annihilated. That is another common fear. Rather, it is the realization of your true nature, which is peace, freedom, and a happiness that does not depend on anything external or internal. It is unconditional. Think of it like this: you have spent your whole life looking at the world through a dirty, stained window, and then someone cleans the window perfectly. The world outside has not changed, but your perception of it has become utterly clear and bright. Nirvana is that clarity. It is not adding something new. It is removing the obscurations that were always there. The path to this freedom is, as you might expect, a gradual and layered process of letting go. You do not jump from being fully attached to completely free in one leap. It starts with the obvious, gross attachments, letting go of excessive material possessions, harmful behaviors, and toxic relationships. Then, as you practice, you move to more subtle levels, letting go of your attachment to certain moods, to your opinions, to your self-image, and even to your spiritual achievements. Every time you release something, you get a taste of the freedom that is possible. It is like peeling an onion, layer by layer, until you reach the core, which is empty of any solid thing but full of potential. Each act of renunciation, each moment of mindfulness, each breath observed with equanimity is a step on this staircase. The obstacles you face along the way are not setbacks. They are the very material you use to practice letting go. When desire arises, you learn to let go of the impulse to cling. When anger arises, you learn to let go of the story that fuels it. When confusion arises, you learn to let go of the need to know everything. This is how you wear down the habits of the mind over time. The culmination of this path is a life that is the very embodiment of effortless flow. A person who has realized nirvana does not become a passive, unfeeling statue. On the contrary, they engage with the world more fully and compassionately than ever before. Their actions are spontaneously ethical, kind, and appropriate to the situation because they are no longer filtered through the selfish concerns of a separate self. They do not act to get something or to avoid something. They act because it is the natural, compassionate response to what is happening. There is no longer a me that is doing the action and trying to control the outcome. Life flows through them unimpeded. They can experience joy and sorrow, but these emotions do not stick. They arise and pass like waves on the ocean. without disturbing the profound depth and stillness beneath. They love without possession, care without burden, and act without leaving traces of attachment behind. This is what is meant by a life of perfect flow. Therefore, the entire journey of stopping caring in the Buddhist sense, which we have explored through all these topics, from understanding suffering and impermanence, to practicing mindfulness, generosity, and forgiveness, is ultimately a journey toward this unconditional freedom. It is not about becoming indifferent or cold. It is about caring so deeply from a place of wisdom that your care no longer creates suffering for yourself or others. It is about shifting from a conditional, needy kind of caring to an unconditional, liberating kind of caring. When you stop caring in the old way, you start living in a new way, where every moment is met with freshness and every being is met with connection. Nirvana is the final release of the rope you have been holding onto so tightly, the rope that you thought was keeping you safe but was actually binding you. When you let go, you discover that you were always free, that the river of life was always carrying you, and that the peace you were seeking was never outside you. This is the ultimate letting go, and it is available here and now, in this very breath, if you are willing to release everything, including the idea that you are the one who is letting go.